Hello, Iris J here with Madrona's Pools Teachings, and this is all about water. So I always introduce them a little bit differently in the beginning, but working with the elements is so important in our own spiritual practices, earth-based spirituality, astrology practices, in healing. The elements reconnect us to embodiment in some of the most foundational ways that we can, and just being a person trying to make their way through the modern world often demands disembodiment. And if we have come through traditional learning structures, they have been built around disembodiment and just privileging the cognitive mind. And embodiment is working to actually unlearn that and come into, through the elements, the way that we have these different elemental makeups, and they give us access to different aspects of meaning making, of self-understanding, of connecting to others. And water is bringing us into our emotions. It is bringing us into our flow. It is bringing us into the reality that our emotions are meant to flow, that they're not meant to just stay in one place, and that we are meant to flow. And so when we're talking about water with astrology, we're talking about the signs of Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. And we also have the water houses, which are the 4th house, the 8th house, and the 12th house on the zodiac and in our natal chart. And it is important, I think, especially if it's your first time kind of coming into working with the chart through the elements, which is the foundational layer of the signs, of the houses. You know, and astrology is ultimately often about a blending of elements. Most likely, you might have a water sign lined up with a water house, but you might have Aries in your 8th house. So then you have the water house with fire energy. So then the archetypes are going to surge through this blending of fire and water energy. And that's where an astrologer can really work with you on kind of the elemental makeup, which is really a foundation of the chart and a foundation of how we embody the archetypes. And there's so much information in the elements and our relationship with them and what they speak to in our own journey of meaning making and of self-inquiry. And so with water, you know, we're talking about a way of knowing that comes through the emotions. We're talking about a way of relating that comes through the emotions. And we're talking about a spirituality that comes through the emotions. The water houses are very much linked to the spiritual birth of the self, the development of the self, the connection and intimacy of going beyond the self, and ultimately the reconnection with source. And so this is interesting because, especially in Western society, we don't really have in mainstream cultures much emotional intelligence. We haven't traditionally valued the emotions the way that the emotions have been for hundreds of years, actually thousands of years, has been very gendered, that women are emotional and men are the stoic intellectuals. We know that we can let all that go, but those stereotypes are still very present. And when we come into understanding emotions through the elements, we just kind of let all that go because there's very little meaning there. And so how do our emotions connect us to knowing whether or not we are safe, knowing whether or not we are enjoying the moment that we're in, who we want to connect with, whom we want to spend time with? How do they connect us to our spirituality? How do they connect us to a way of knowing that is primary to thought? These are some of the questions that working with our emotions, and especially water, carry us into. Now, having a lot of water in your chart is not always easy, especially because we do not have cultures that traditionally value them. So if you have a lot of Cancer in your chart, You know, this is deeply feeling energy. Even when we use the word sensitive, like that word is usually stigmatized. There's this idea that I shouldn't be as sensitive as I am. There's this idea that I'm too sensitive. Raise your hand if you were called too sensitive growing up or still, right? And sensitivity is just that. It is sensitive to my surroundings. It is sensitive to the emotional states of others. It is sensitive to the moods. It is sensitive to my ecosystem. And there's really no good or bad about it. With Cancer, it just simply is. And yet, if we get taught that we're not supposed to be sensitive, if we get taught that we're not supposed to cry, if we get taught that we have to shut down our emotions when we're feeling them, well, this can be very confusing for the psyche. It can be very confusing for our experience of embodiment, because we have been taught not to feel what is natural to feel. And so this can be a journey of reclaiming, of learning that it is okay to feel what I feel, of learning that I might have been taught to shut down those moods, or I might have been taught, you know, to not show them. And so here, often working with water energy, it's most important to tell ourselves how we feel. There sometimes is this, I mean, it's very difficult in our culture because we have so much pop psychology out there on social media that's woven through spiritual rhetoric. And, you know, but sometimes people are just, I'm working on knowing my emotions, and so I throw them all on another person. That can also be projecting. That, you know, our sensitivity is first and foremost about us being aware of what we're feeling with and for ourselves. And this is where something like therapy can be really useful, because this person has hopefully been trained to hold space and simply allow you to feel exactly what you are feeling, and hopefully not judge that, okay? And yet there are also so many other ways of becoming aware of our emotions. Journaling can be wonderful for getting into a flow, especially if we're not journaling in a narrative way, but we're actually training our language to just let the emotion flow in words, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it's not publishable, even if it's gibberish, even if it's things I was taught I was not to say. It's letting language express the flow, and that is sometimes necessary for water energy, because water needs to move in a different way than fire, but it needs to flow. And so sometimes we need an external form to help us see that flow. And this is where the arts are absolutely invaluable. Whether it is painting or singing or clay or any aesthetic medium, can be really, especially if we were not taught at whatever age we are, because a lot of us have not been allowed to feel our flow of our emotions and all of the incredible intuition that is also coming in a different way than fire. Fire is intuition. Water is a different type of intuitive understanding that comes and speaks through the emotions. And sometimes it needs, especially if we're in a journey of reclaiming our emotions, reclaiming our access to our feeling, we need mediums that can sometimes contain that for us to look at it. And that's where the arts can be wonderful. But especially when we're working with water, not to fit, this is not about technique. This is not about matching what someone says is good art. This is purely about expression, because that's what water craves. It craves expression. And the type of expression is different in astrology on the archetypal water signatures. Like Cancer just wants to express what it's feeling. It wants to express its need for nurturing. It wants to express nurturing to others, but it ultimately just wants to express a sense of self in feeling. Scorpio is expressing the depths of experience. All the more reason that Scorpio sometimes requires language that is not explicit, because especially in mainstream society, we do not talk about the depths that Scorpio feels. And especially if a Scorpio child isn't allowed to freely explore those depths and freely express them, it gets shamed, it gets stigmatized, it gets taught lessons about its need to go into the depths, its own depths, society's depths, a parent's depths, other depths. Scorpio just goes into depths. It goes into the occult depths. It goes into the depths of astrology. It goes into what society doesn't talk about, because this is what the archetype is for. It's not taboo. Those depths are not taboo. The only reason they're taboo is because we have organized a culture of silencing that doesn't understand those depths are part of human experience. And if we get obsessed with those depths, that's not because Scorpio is so dark. It's because we have a society that has marginalized certain experiences. And Scorpio just goes. And those depths want to flow. So all of the kind of Scorpio is so vindictive, or I don't know, there's so many stereotypes about Scorpio out there that are just not helpful, because they're working with a Scorpio. If Scorpio is manifesting that way, it's most likely because Scorpio has been victimized at some point in its life and it hasn't been allowed to shine in the depths, because that's what Scorpio energy does, speak in the depths. If you have Mercury in Scorpio, right, that is an expression that wants to move through those depths. But again, if the water energy has been blocked, if the flow has been blocked, if water is told, if water is shamed, water feels that shame very deeply. And we have a society that collectively tends to shame emotion, feeling emotion, expressing emotion. And therefore, it's like a double shaming, because often water energy is so sensitive, all three of them, that it shames itself. And that's the layer for water energy that needs to heal. It's often not, yes, of course, whatever external shaming was happening, but water, when it gets detached from its flow, then it teaches itself that it's not supposed to feel that, and it shames itself for that. And that is harmful for water. Water gets to flow. It gets to feel its emotions. And if we have Pisces water, I'm feeling the overwhelming struggle for Pisces strong signatures that aren't allowed to go to those depths, because we're talking about the depths of spirit and human experience, the collective unconsciousness. We're talking about pure feeling of all that is with Pisces. It's incredible depths. It is an incredible amount of emotion to channel. And if you have a lot of Pisces or 12th house energy, it's not an easy life. And part of the reason it's not an easy life is not because of the Pisces person. It's because of the way that we've organized society and the types of values and meaning structures that we've created, and the way that they tend to shame and marginalize those who are most sensitive. Because in this society, you can become extremely wealthy and extremely famous if you shut down your emotions and you perform in a certain way. Or you perform emotions, welcome to celebrity culture and pop culture, you perform them in a certain way that gets validated. And all of what I just said is so far from the Pisces realm. It's actually really far from all the water signs, because water does not feel in any way other than what it is flowing with. And so when we bring emotions into a performance level so that it can be validated and attain social and financial capital and political capital, it's actually quite a perversion of water energy and emotion, because we're talking about spirit source energy connecting with the individual journey. And this is where, astrology, when we're using it aligned with a spirituality, with an earth-based spirituality, the archetypes speak in a way that shows us the shadow, of mainstream kind of consensus culture. And it shows us how that is also fear-driven and perpetuating violence and exploitation of the environment. Whereas this is where earth-based spirituality and working with like when we work with embodiment of the elements, our life changes. Our values change, the direction of our path changes, the way that we relate to the world and to others changes. And ultimately, it is because we have come into this inherent belonging with the ecosystems and earth-based communication and all of the elements working together is how this happens. And for the spiritual path, water is archetypally, and the water houses are part of the journey of the birthing of the self going into the depths and connecting beyond itself so that it can connect and reconnect to source over and over and over. And then the other elements all work with that. And this is where an embodied practice is really, really important for healing and for earth-based spirituality, okay? But again, and always in all the videos, okay? So of course, we can get way pulled in to an element, okay? Especially if you have a lot of water in your chart. And so there, we want to lean in to what's opposite. So if you are feeling overwhelmed by your emotions, if they're coming from all this Cancer, or it's coming from the depths of Scorpio and it's feeling like too much, or you are literally feeling the collective unconscious in all of your Pisces, like we want to lean in to what's opposite, and in elementally, that's earth energy. And this can be very, very important for water energy. So that is grounding practices, literally laying on the ground, okay? Especially if the emotions are just feeling too much, laying on the ground and bringing a focus awareness to how the ground is literally supporting us. Doing this outside is wonderful. Leaning against a tree, like actually working with the elements of earth, leaning against a tree and letting and like bringing my awareness to feeling a body scan of the tree supporting me. If I'm just sitting in a chair, really focusing my awareness, my felt embodied awareness on how the chair holds me. Because earth is always holding us. And sometimes if we're caught in the emotions of water, we're forgetting that we are held and we're just feeling so much. And so really coming into grounding earth practices can be really important. Also, the expression of those emotions, whether it's through journaling or writing or in dialogue with a loved one or a dear animal companion, that can be really healing and nurturing as well. And with that, Nikita and I are going to sign off. Be well.